Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Health Matters with yours truly, Danielle Linane.
And your co-host, Dr. Ryan Breshears.
Today we are continuing on our special series on behavioral health specific to COVID-19. Doc, why don't you tell our listeners about who we're going to be talking to today?
Absolutely. So today we're talking with clinical psychologist, Dr. Mark Rowland, and he's going to talk with us about the 5 domains of post-traumatic growth.
Want to know what those 5 domains are? Grab your pens and listen in. So really excited today to introduce you all to a new series with the current climate of the world really right now with coronavirus or COVID-19, as it is also referred to. We are partnering with Dr. Ryan Breshears. Hello, Doc.
Hey, how are you?
Good, doing good. So Dr. Breshears and I are partnering, and we're going to co-host a 6-episode, potentially longer, depending on what we see fit moving forward, sure. But we're going to be hosting a series on behavioral health is really a good way to kind of sound that up. So, Doc, before we introduce our first guest in the series, I want you to tell everyone just a little bit about yourself, about your background. I like for everyone to get to know our people before we dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did my doctorate work at the University of Georgia. I went to...
Go Dogs.
That's right. Go Dogs. Went to the Denver VA Medical Center where I did an internship and then stayed on for a residency there. And really my focus at that time, I studied suicide prevention and traumatic brain injury, the interface between those two. Came back to the Atlanta area, which is home originally. And here at Wellstar, I've been at Wellstar now for 10 years and am currently the chief of behavioral health and then also the director of psychology and psychiatry for the system. So have had a great journey here. It's good. It's been good to be home. And
definitely. Yeah. So Doc, why don't you, because Dr. Roland, our guest today, is a friend of yours. So why don't you introduce Dr. Roland?
If we use that word, I don't know. Friend? You think that works?
I don't know. I know she's pushing us together quite quickly with this whole world.
It's going to go with associate.
Yes, social distance. I don't know. But, we'll see what we can do with that.
Dr. Mark Rowland, it is good to have you.
Thanks. Good to be here.
It's great to have you. I'm going to give just a brief background from what I know about you, and then you can fill in the gaps. But did your doctorate at the University of Tennessee, which does not suit well or fit well with my collegiate allegiance as a Bulldog. Room, really. But you're at Tennessee, and then you went to Medical College of Georgia for residency. Right. And really your career has been really a series of steps around trauma, working with veterans who have had trauma, and other individuals, and you're currently in private practice here in the Marietta area. Anything you want to add? You've done a lot more than that.
It has been traumatic, actually. To think about the whole, and being a UT fan, that's a trauma all in its own here. But the Medical College of Georgia was awesome. Just because part of the trauma training was, what would you think? You're in supervision, you're talking about psychological trauma. Some of it was like once or twice a week, they throw you in like with a Jaws of Life vehicle, and you'd ride around with the EMTs until something happened. And then, they'd take care of the medical part and they'd say, you deal with this trauma part, this other part. So that was some good training at that facility.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And really just over the last 10 years is our friendship, and I will use that word, is developed. Yeah, it's been really cool because we're neighbors as well as friends and colleagues, both being psychologists, and you're a person that I often look to provide insights around different professional experiences and challenges. So it's great to have you here. So you're also the first person that came to my mind when Danielle and I were talking about the concept of really deploying this podcast series in the context of the season that we're in with COVID-19. And specifically your background in what you've taught me around these concepts related to post-traumatic growth, growth through adversity, things of that nature. I thought, wow, what an opportunity to bring you in here and just have some conversation around how those concepts and principles really play into our realities that we're experiencing now. So could we kind of kick it off there,
Sure.
just with this concept of post-traumatic growth, and even just recently, you helped me to better understand some of these related concepts. So what is post-traumatic growth?
Well, post-traumatic growth is some type of positive outcome that comes about through going through a really tough time. So that's just the general way to look at it. And we know that from our lives, friends' lives, the movies we watch. We're really drawn to those movies that they're going through something tough, then something bright comes out about it. And one thing about post-traumatic growth is, even on the other side of it, when we have the growth, nobody's completely grateful that the trauma happened.
Mm-hmm.
But you're grateful for how you got through it, and you've gained a sense of wisdom that you wouldn't have had otherwise, and that couldn't have been attained any otherwise. So the post-traumatic growth, it's not what I was hoping it would be when I first heard about it. I thought it would be this experience you go through, and all pain and all memory of anything nasty is gone.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not. It's just there's this growth and maturity that happens while you have a respect and broader sense of what reality can be, that can lead to better decisions for what to do tomorrow and the day after that. And that's a huge part of post-traumatic growth. And I may refer to it as PTG. When we get good at when we become an expert at something, we start using all these codes, right?
That's right.
So, so that's the PTG.
That's true.
And a lot of it has to do with, how do we move forward from times of uncertainty? And we're definitely in that right now.
Absolutely.
With the COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So post-traumatic growth, as opposed to some of these similar concepts, growth through adversity, benefit finding, resilience, those are, you've walked me through and helped me really understand the similarities and differences in those. But can you summarize for our listeners here, what are those concepts?
Right. Well, to move to growth through adversity. And if you do any kind of Google searches, you'll find different terms. That's the main one you'll find. It's pretty much what you think. Someone who's gone through a tough time and they've experienced some type of growth and maturity. Now, the difference in growth through adversity versus post-traumatic growth could be kind of like if you're working out and you're working a muscle, that's growth through adversity.
Mm-hmm.
You have some kind of program, and hopefully it's not coming in too many starts and stops, but you're kind of growing it.
Mm-hmm.
Post-traumatic growth will be what happens after you've torn that muscle.
Mm-hmm.
There's been something broken, something shattered that you can't turn around, and it's better.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to find a way to get better from that.
So, before you go into the other concepts, so is post-traumatic growth in relation to a discrete kind of moment in time event? And you would say that growth through adversity is growth that comes about throughout the course of a process?
I can see how you think that based on how I answered the question. And that can happen, but I guess to be even more accurate, it could be a one-time event, or it could be a chronic, more over-time event.
Okay.
For either one.
Got it. Okay.
It'll have a different feel or flavor to it.
Mm-hmm. And then benefit finding.
Benefit finding, post-traumatic growth and growth through adversity, they're very similar. Benefit finding is something that kind of comes along, something you don't anticipate. It just happens to be there. It's some kind of positive aspect of life or your routine that comes along with some changes. Like right now, some benefit finding might be, I know for my family, even though we're busy in different ways, more margin has come into our life. There's more gaps between some things that happen. Maybe because we have to think about it. How do we get groceries?
Right.
You have to pause. Or what do we do now? Like with uncertainty. So we have more margin, more times to take a breath. Wouldn't have anticipated that.
So it's kind of like seeing the silver lining.
Yeah, it's whatever comes along.
Okay.
Like I know some people who deal with cancer and have treatment. Usually what comes along with that is some dietary changes.
Right.
More exercise.
Right.
More support.
Right.
So that's what benefit finding is. It's separate enough, but it doesn't involve growth you're going through.
Right.
It's just what kind of comes along with it.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And resilience, I put that in there too. And it's really different. It's more like the emotional and skill bank account that's developing. It's what you're sort of building as you go through that.
It's like the outcome.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's like you've gotten a little stronger in some ways, and that can either help you not really take a hit from what happens or help you bounce back faster.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So what would you say it is now in relationship to, COVID-19? Which of these would you say is kind of the most relevant to the state of the world at the moment?
It seems like it's mainly the first two, even though there's some resilience and benefit finding going on too. Mm-hmm. I hope for everybody it's more growth through adversity.
Yeah.
Hopefully no one has had part of their life just, broken and torn.
Right.
Some have. Mm-hmm. And some of us have had some friends who've actually, their life has ended because of COVID-19. I had someone just this past week that, so in their lives, they're having to go through some post-traumatic stress, definitely, and hopefully growth will come. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just like growth, it's not guaranteed. There's some things to do to help it happen, but hopefully most of us are going through the growth through adversity. I haven't found anyone who's just thrilled that we're having to make these changes.
Right.
So mainly growth through adversity. Mm-hmm.
I know one of the things Dr. Breshears and I were actually talking about this when he first got here. Benefit finding has been very helpful for me right now in a sense of expressing gratitude and looking for tiny things that happen throughout the day that normally I would completely ignore. But in this situation, it's almost like we have no other choice. Well, we do have a choice, but the better choice is to just find that gratitude, that small thing to be thankful for.
Right.
One of those being that I am in healthcare during a time like this, and that I do still have a job.
Right.
A lot of people that don't. So I know for myself, I think benefit finding has been very helpful right now, and something I really hope I hold on to in the future.
Good.
So.
Yeah. And I love hearing that too. And I hadn't thought of it, but it is like the silver lining in the cloud. It's just there.
It is. Absolutely.
Well, I can think about how these different concepts really play with where you are in your life. The impact that COVID-19 has had on each of us is probably quite different. And even when you look within healthcare, the impact on frontline workers may be very different from somebody who's not direct facing to patients in the hospital or on the front lines, so to speak. And so, just thinking about, I can see how for some of us, looking, for example, one of the first things I noticed the very first week was, the time that I have with my kids is, it seems much more intentional right now than it did before. And I like that. That's something that I want to continue forward. And I think there's some of those experiences that a lot of us have had. And then, but to juxtapose that, so somebody's on the front lines and they're going really into the war zone day after day. Which of these concepts do you think is most important or most salient, perhaps, for those individuals, these frontline workers?
That is a different world. I think most people who I come in contact with in my private practice, they aren't in healthcare. I guess number one, they wouldn't have enough free time to come see me, during the day. They're some busy individuals. So they're definitely in the middle of the uncertainty. And I would guess they have less margin. So, just thinking about what I've seen from some people in their responses of reaching out and showing more care and concern for GoFundMe, meals, different things like that, because they don't have the margin, and they're having a lot of body contact. How social it is. Yeah, it's kind of hard when you throw a mask and then a shield, right? On top of the mask, and so I'm just glad that they aren't having to be totally responsible for their own social support. That others are reaching out. That I haven't, in the years I've been in Marietta, I haven't ever seen that happen. Yeah, or even in a medical college. So this is a new thing.
So kind of a rallying of support around this team of individuals and looking at through the adversity that healthcare workers are experiencing on the front lines, to be able to kind of lean in to that social support. I wonder if that's an opportunity. It actually reminds me, there was when the Canadian SARS outbreak occurred back in 2003, there were some studies that followed healthcare workers on the heels of that. And they found that there were some common factors, kind of contextual factors, that predicted higher levels of distress. And the three that were most salient from that work were individuals had higher levels of distress when they had kids at home, if they were nurses, and depending on how proximal or how close they were to actually working directly with patients who had contracted SARS. And so what we learned was, okay, so these are some contextual risk factors, and if we look at, will that generalize to help us understand, opportunities to support people with the given pandemic, then maybe there are some things that we can do. And so there was a study that actually was just released this week that looked at healthcare workers in Wuhan who were also close to this particular pandemic, and they found the exact same variables that were predictive of emotional distress with SARS in Canada were the same factors that were associated with distress in China. And there was a related study that really caught my eye, and that was that they found that the degree to which people were able to mitigate isolation, their levels of distress were significantly reduced. And that's what's really compelling to me about what you shared around like the community rallying together. And I think about that then within the walls of the hospital that you're working. What maybe that's where we use some of these. We take this adversity that we're dealing with, and if we can grow through richer development of relationships and lean into one another, come together as teams, maybe that's part of. Maybe that's one of the more important concepts that we need to leverage here. But what are your thoughts about that?
No, I agree. Even thinking about post-traumatic growth, there are 5 elements to it. One of them is that sense of a greater and deeper sense of belonging with people. Okay. Feeling more connected, maybe to everybody, maybe in some sense humanity. Some of that's going on, but at least to certain people. So that is a huge aspect in post-traumatic growth and for what I'm seeing now. And even whatever's going on within the confines and perimeters of those walls with the healthcare team, however they're pulling together. And I did see some studies that showed it, all social support and contact isn't identical.
Right.
It seems like the social contact where the different people in that group or that entity are encouraged to have a sense of control, to have a sense of responsibility, some autonomy, and not get into the blame game.
Right.
And that could be part of letting some emotions go, but those groups that help encourage a sense of responsibility and what you can do, that helps a lot.
So could that could almost, you could speak directly to leadership at that point to, within your own teams to establish those type of principles, allow that sense of control. I'm using air quotes that you guys can't see right now. But that sense of control and autonomy within your team and build trust within your team is really what I'm hearing a lot from that.
Yes, and I see that with looking at some of the literature from what we're talking about now, some of the business literature for those leaders. There's so much overlap with how to build your team and not stand above them and just direct, but how to help them be more autonomous and pull together, to delegate to them, to let them come up with some solutions.
Right.
Because part of this uncertainty is we need everybody's thinking process of thinking this through as a group. But what I see also is each individual, that helps them so much to be able to explore their own thoughts and uncertainty and some aspects that seem to be apparent paradoxes. How can this be true and this be true?
Right.
And so to be able to think about that and make it intentional, use that word intentional.
Yeah.
And then to share that with other people, there's just a lot that can happen with personal growth and through team growth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it really is fascinating because I have not thought about, there's been a lot of attention on the stress that healthcare workers are experiencing. And then there seems to almost be a separate conversation for everybody else. And I have not really thought about how, the example you gave around how the community can lean in and support in this kind of, it's almost like a bridging of the boundaries.
Yeah.
It's where when you walk in the doors of the facility, you're not disconnected from the rallying and support that you're getting from one another's. And when you frame it that way, it's like, well, that feels like we're more in it together. Not that my experience as a frontline worker is the same as a non-frontline worker, but when you're rallying around kind of a common vision, and that seems to really tie into the core and critical components of healthy functioning teams at a time like this, is to keep the true north. Right. And you're going to end up with a culture.
Right.
With any team. It's what are the constituent parts that make it a healthy culture that supports one another versus one that actually has dynamics that erode the culture and leave people feeling isolated.
Right.
That seems like a really important.
It is, and it reminds me of some of the military personnel I have the privilege to work with, and some of them are leaders. And the different branches, it's interesting to hear the competition between them. You would think it would be Georgia and UT a battle. And it can be, like with the Navy and the Army. The Army, they have a phrase that I really like. It's mission first, people always. So it's like the focus on the mission. You have something to do, but the people are always. You have to keep that relationship going.
Yeah. And
Very interesting.
Danielle, that seems like very consistent with the conversation we've been having. Is how do we continue to really focus on that as being the most important thing, which is the most important thing being taking care of our patients and taking care of one another. And those are inseparable concepts.
100%. I've been managing employee wellness for the system for about 2 years now. And our philosophy is we take care of our people so that they can take care of the community. And I think right now, Dr. Breshears and mine's partnership has been solely that, specific to this time. And it's created a very unusual barrier for me because I've never been in a situation like like this? And how do you know what's right? How do you know? I mean, we were talking about this before we started today. Is how do we know where to meet them? And I think now it's really encouraging this culture of trust, this culture of togetherness, and that social support at work is so important. And just communicating that, I think that's really very interesting. Everything that we're talking about right now, I love it.
Yeah,
and I like that publication, that handbook you made available to me.
Yep.
For
the toolkit.
The toolkit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Thank you. I couldn't remember the name of it. And so many good things in there,
Right?
That fit with research and what I've seen, and it's great when you learn from somebody. I heard someone say that it helped them to be self-aware as they're treating their patients, and they said that they try to be aware of 3 things. I hadn't thought of it this way, but to be aware of what they're feeling, which is tough because they're so aware of what's going on, triage, what do I need to do, what are all these procedures that I've had some training in, but we didn't train on this last year or the year before that. Right. So what am I feeling? What are they feeling? What are they telling me they're feeling? And third, it's related, I think, to every healthcare worker. What kind of empathy am I having toward them? It's almost like a third thing. Mm-hmm. What am I feeling for them, toward them, which could be different from what I'm feeling when all I'm having to do.
Right.
They told me how those can get all jumbled up for them, and they aren't even sure what they're feeling anymore.
Interesting. Yeah. I read in one of the studies that Dr. Breshears had shared with me was mainly talking about SARS and how a significant portion of the population, the Filipino population, had leaned into their faith, their spirituality. Why do you think that is during times like this? Why do you think people kind of lean into faith?
Actually, that's one of the 5 components of post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
Is some increased sense of spiritual depth, whether that's with a higher level of connectivity to something above themselves, like something more humanity-based. But in most sense, it is something spiritual, something related to the sense of the divine for them.
However you define that.
However you happen to define that. It seems to go across cultures. And these 5 factors that will work in whenever they fit, but it comes from all these different studies, all these meta-analysis. It does seem to be someone reaching for something more than this moment.
It's interesting. It's interesting. It's it almost kind of appears like it helps to provide that purpose. Maybe a little that sense of purpose that I truly believe is very important, for everyone, every human moving along. So very interesting.
And for the research, it's not that some of those who experience some growth in their spirituality, it's not like it's a tag-on kind of explanation or answer to keep someone from thinking about what's going on, but it helps with I guess part of the growth is I need a better understanding of why this happened. How could this happen? What could explain this? What could help pull it back together? And it seems like a person's spirituality helps pull it together to kind of explain a larger, broader picture that's more encompassing than some simple answer.
Well, I think it also, maybe going along with that, it keeps your world intact. Trauma is all about a disruption to the world that you know. Things are traumatic when the impossible becomes possible. Not something that's beyond your level of academic or intellectual understanding. You know that an event could happen to you theoretically. Right. But when that's not emotionally felt, trauma is about the world that I thought was no longer is. Something unthinkable has come into play. And spirituality seems to be that which helps to mitigate and reconnect you with a greater sense of what actually is. Your reality stays intact. Is that
right? Yes. And it reminds me of one of my best pictures of trauma is what Janov Bullman came up with in the 90s of shattered assumptions.
Yeah.
You have these assumptions, and it's not that they get poked and prodded in some adversity. They get shattered. They don't work anymore. What do you do with that? I think that meaning making is like taking that shattered vase, and you can't make a vase anymore, but you can make a mosaic piece of art or something that's even better, something that explains. And spirituality, for those who journey into that part of their life, it does help explain what's going on and give unity and help you have some groundedness.
You mentioned some other components of PTG, that framework. You said that there were 5, spirituality being one. Can you touch on the others?
Sure. And I think we may make some kind of image available somewhere, somehow. And if not, I can make some way to make it available. But I guess I did kind of stumble across this graphic that showed some of the 5 components. And one thing about the components, if someone experiences post-traumatic growth, they may have growth, may need growth in only one of these, 2 of these. Doesn't have to be an all or none. So it's different in that way. And that's actually what's made the research a little difficult on like which populations have what type of growth. It can be so varied. But anyway, one of the types of growth that can be experienced is a sense of increased in personal strength, competency, more of either, wow, I've gained some wisdom, or if I live through that,
I can do hard things.
I can do hard things.
Yeah.
Just proof to self that you can come out of that. And it also helps that people start to understand, well, adversities are a part of life.
Right.
And I don't have to have an identity that I have to dodge the hard parts to be me. I can face them, live through them, and still be me. I can have that kind of personal strength and identity. And what we've also we've definitely touched on the spiritual development, spiritual growth, and
relationships a little too.
Right, and the relationships too. And that's a third component. So what I like just organically is how we're talking about what we've seen people go through is fitting with post-traumatic growth.
Right.
And that's how a meta-analysis study should go. It should be very organic. So the close relationships, and then not just broader and deeper relationships, but with post-traumatic growth, people learn a greater sense of discernment in their relationships, like who to turn to for what, which I've seen changes how they trust.
That's interesting. And it plays into the concept of teams.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Leadership that you mentioned.
Yeah. So you become wiser around people and with people.
That kind of brings there's a saying that we hear sometimes that people sometimes show true colors in moments of adversity. And I think that's probably what I'm hearing is that's kind of where that you kind of learn from that. You learn the most from people during times like this. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And while it's true, sometimes I don't like what comes out of me in those times. But it's like, okay, forget the denial. I just did that, or I just felt that. So, okay, let me do something with that. Thus growth instead of avoidance of the truth.
Interesting. And then you have another one on here is that greater appreciation. What's interesting to me about this one is that I feel like this one, it almost is all encompassing, like the others create that greater appreciation. Yes. They all kind of do really mold together. They mesh very well.
Right. I think so. And the great appreciation for life is like you were talking about, and like benefit finding fits in here too. It's like, I'd taken that for granted, whatever that is. There are a lot of little things that we've taken for granted.
Going to the movies.
That's right.
Going to the gym.
I missed that one too. And I think the great appreciation for life what goes with that is a reassessing and resetting of your priorities. Mm-hmm. What's really important to me? What is it I really appreciate? And I thought I really liked that and needed that, but you know what? I really didn't.
Don't miss that
I don't miss that much. That's weird.
So is that kind of a tip you could tell our listeners, is be noticing those types of things during this time? Like if you're looking for a real life, hey, what can I do to try and grow from this? That could be a suggestion. There is
definitely.
What do you miss the most right now? Is it going to the gym? Is it being able to go to the mall and walk around? I've got some folks who are members here that do that every Saturday morning, and they can't do that anymore. So what are those things that you're missing the most, and pay attention to those, and then remember that. Keep that in mind moving forward.
Right. There are a lot of good questions that can come out of that, like what makes me mad? What makes me sad? What makes me laugh? All those can be associated with our priorities. Mm-hmm. And this fits right well with the last category, which is new possibilities. Nobody likes change. We don't like change. They say the only thing that doesn't change is change. Change always changes.
That's so true.
So we don't like it. And so there's always new possibilities. But sometimes we like it after we experience what's new. And so that goes well together with what you were talking about, just looking around and think, well, what is here I hadn't realized before, or what might be possible now that wasn't before. And I've had the same experience with my children, just more time to do things we haven't done in a long time, or just a new way to think about doing family.
Right.
So a lot of new possibilities that we could ignore if we don't pay attention.
There are some pleasant surprises.
Yes.
Not one of which is how great it's been to spend time with you today.
Well, thank you very much.
It's been insightful. Absolutely what we thought it would be. Dr. Roland.
Definitely.
Danielle, any last words?
No, I think one thing that I would like to hear is, what are some things that maybe you're speaking to leadership right now, maybe you're speaking to, physicians, but what are some things that Wellstar can do to kind of harness that growth and hopefully help to build some resiliency from coming out of this?
I appreciate the question. And also the one person in this room who probably could say the least about that, just because I'm not sure all that's being done. I mean, I've read the guide, and
you've seen the toolkit, and I mean, we're doing resources like this. And I guess maybe is it, to sum up kind of what you said, is building those teams, that culture of trust within your team and engaging in social relationships. I mean,
yes. And one thing that I've seen with a lot of businesses is they talk about this core idea, like with C, is how to have each person have more control, personal control, more autonomy.
Yes.
And like we can't control the uncertainty, but we can work on controlling our response to it. We need some kind of control.
That's good. Yeah.
And like the O would be ownership. What's your part of this? What's your job? How can you make something good happen? And that's a big part of not just PTG, but the whole well-being, wellness ideas. Mm-hmm. What can I do to contribute and have some good outcomes? Mm-hmm. What's your ownership?
Yeah.
It's not just a job.
No matter how big or small.
Right. Yeah. Right. No matter. And then the R is just how far does this trauma that we're going through, how much reach does it have in my life? I think that's where the team can come together talking, because in my own head, I know me, my own head, I can think of this adversity, trauma, this COVID-19 having a far reach in my life and my future, and, getting that catastrophic thinking. So just the idea of reach can be important for a team. How far might this reach or not? And I think we need other people's ideas to help us get a better idea of that, and then the E is kind of endurance. What do we need to do to keep on keeping on? How long might this be going on? Just to keep on moving forward, one step in front of the other. How do we do that as a team? So that's just something I've gotten from the business community, which I think should fit anywhere.
I agree.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roland.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Learned
Thank you for having me.
Wealth of knowledge. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming on.
You're welcome.
And guys, we will, the image that he was referring earlier, we will have that posted up in the show notes for you, or it may just be posted on the screen for you to watch the whole time while we're talking through this. But tune in next week. We will have another new episode for you guys around COVID-19. Thanks for listening.